So then what is the purpose of the Sabbath that Jesus is getting across in the story? In the previous chapter, we read a little bit of that in 11. You're going to see that Jesus he's been sternly condemning the Pharisees for burdening the people with unnecessary obligations and rules. So he makes a different invitation, an invitation to everyone to become his disciples and to learn of his easy yoke and experience rest for their soul. And I love the way that Dr. Michael Wilkins describes the purpose in his commentary. He says this. He says, Jesus has come to bring rest to those who take on his yoke of discipleship, the kind of rest to which the Sabbath was designed to point. The kind of rest to which the Sabbath was designed to point. In other words, the Sabbath is directly correlated with experiencing rest that our souls need, the rest that Jesus promised to give when we embrace the call to become his apprentices. You see, what I've been learning this past year, as I've been studying the Sabbath, I've been learning this. I've been learning that the practice of the Sabbath is incredibly, incredibly essential to experience a life filled with restfulness, but also to experience what Jesus talked about experiencing rivers of living water flowing from within our hearts. And the reason why is this, and this is another big point, that God designed Sabbath to be a normal rhythm of life for his creation to practice. That's the reason. Because from the very beginning, God designed Sabbath to be a normal rhythm of life for his creation to practice. Now, let me show you where in the world I'm getting this from. In Exodus 20, you're going to find the giving of the 10 Commandments. Now, if you haven't grown up in church, that's okay, bear with me. But the 10 Commandments, most of us know, are pretty famous, okay? They were given to Israel after God liberated them from from Egypt. They were in slavery to the Egyptians. And the commandments were given to the people of Israel because they would become a way of life that described what redeemed people look like. The commandments were not a means of salvation, but rather they describe what saved people and redeemed people should live like, should look like. Now, from my observations of being a Christ follower for quite some time now, the fourth commandment is a commandment that we tend to break and at the same time boast about not following. The reason is because we live in a culture where expressing how tirelessly we work is seen as praiseworthy. So if you work 50, 60 hours, that's great. You're such a hard worker. But listen to what the fourth commandment says. Exodus 20, 8-11. It says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. Neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. And therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Now, out of all the 10 commandments, this is the only commandment that comes with an explanation that goes back all the way to creation. It's the only commandment that has an explanation that comes all the way back to creation. And the reason is that keeping Sabbath, which is not just an Old Testament law the people in Israel have to follow. Sabbath keeping predates the law. It actually originated in the beginning when God created everything. One last passage. Genesis 2, taking you back to the beginning. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all of his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. You see, the establishment of the Sabbath goes back to the very beginning of creation, because this is the way that God designed to be a normal rhythm of life for his creation to practice. Let me ask you this. Why do you think God rested? Why do you think God rested? Does God need to rest? Mitch, does God need to rest? No, right? He's an all-powerful God. He doesn't get tired. So the fact that he decides to rest is intentional. God himself was modeling for all of creation this essential rhythm for how to live life the way that he intended. This is what he's doing in Genesis. He's modeling this for all of us. And this is the reason why you're going to see Jesus reminding the Pharisees of the true purpose of Sabbath. A day not of burdens or obligations, but a day where our souls, all of ourselves, are reminded of the true rest that Jesus gives to us when we are abiding in him, when we are abiding in him. Now, let me stop here for a second. I gave you 3 passages quickly. I've given you a lot of high-level theological foundation for something that for so many years I personally completely miss. And I'm guessing most of you haven't heard much about the Sabbath before. But I hope that you can see, like I've shown you, like I've seen this past year, how essential Sabbath keeping is. There's something about this practice. There's something about this that's incredibly important and essential to our discipleship to Jesus. So let me explain exactly what Sabbath keeping looks like. What Sabbath keeping looks like. Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat. Comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which literally means to stop and to rest. To stop and to rest. Shabbat also can mean delighting and worshiping. Other definitions of that. And I love the way that John Mark Comer, a pastor, talks about Sabbath in his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. He says this, he says, the Sabbath is simply a day to stop working, stop wanting, stop worrying. But he says it is more than a day. It is a way of being in the world. It's a spirit of restfulness that comes from abiding, from living by the Father's loving presence all week long. That's really good. And here is the basic components that I want to leave with you and I want to communicate to you that describes the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a day of stopping, of resting, of delighting, and worshiping. It's a day or a way of being of stopping and resting, delighting, and worshiping. To make it even more practical, I love Rich Villodas in his book, A Deeply Formed Life, talking about the Sabbath. He gives it a little more practicality. He defines it this way. He says, Sabbath keeping is a weekly 24-hour period of unhurried delight with no have-tos, no ought-tos, nothing to do, nothing to ought to do, resulting in deep rest and renewal. Now, there's a lot here that I want to unpack and deal with, especially deal with arguments against this. But before I do, let me give you 4 reminders about the Sabbath that I have found personally helpful this past year in further understanding how to do a proper Sabbath. And Rich has helped me, Villodas have helped me understand this as well. The first one is this, the first reminder is this. Sabbath is not a reward earned for hard work. Sabbath is not a reward earned for hard work. You see, at times, some of us, people like me who are wired to do and to perform, we tend to think that we only deserve a day of Sabbath when we are working and working until we have no energy left and we crash. And it's like, oh yeah, now I can rest. But you're so tired, you're not doing anything that day. This is not the way that the Sabbath is supposed to be. The second reminder, Sabbath is a reminder, this is a big one, that our work remains incomplete. It's a reminder that our work remains incomplete. You see, sometimes, depending on the season of life that you're in or the stage of life, you're like, hey, I don't have time. Once I'm over the season or over this stage or over this, then I'm going to be able to Sabbath. The reality, however, is that there will always be work to do at all seasons and stages of life. But you have to be okay with leaving some work incomplete in order to spend the day with God and others. It's a big one for some of us. It's hard for us to do that. Third reminder, this is the big one for me. Sabbath is a day that moves us from production to presence. Listen to this. This means that Sabbath is rest from the need to make something of ourselves. Anyone need to hear that this morning? I know I do. This means that Sabbath is rest from the need to make something of ourselves. And I love how Rich talks about this, Villodas, about this particular reminder. And listen to this. He says, Sabbath keeping might be the greatest sign of grace because it's while we are intentionally doing nothing or accomplishing nothing that God loves us. You see that? It's that while we're intentionally doing nothing, that God loves that, loves us. It's incredibly, incredibly powerful. It is a day of being present with God, present to others, present to creation, and this one present to ourselves. It is not a day off to just watch Netflix 8 hours a day or to escape, in our favorite form of escapism that we tend to go when we are tired. But it's a day where we're fully aware of God's presence. And the fourth reminder, which is not here, let me say it to you. Sabbath points us to the deeper rest that we need. Sabbath points us to the deeper rest that we need. What I mean by this is that when we intentionally set a day to Sabbath, to be fully present with God and others, what happens is we begin to have a glimpse of the easy yoke that Jesus talked about and begin to experience the abundant life that being an apprentice to Jesus brings.